Recently I put out an Iceberg video detailing a large selection of the Xbox 360 library. What I barely touched upon though was the Kinect games. If you're unaware what the Kinect was, it was the future of gaming. Well, it was touted as being. It was a camera with actually pretty impressive room and body mapping capabilities, if used in the right hands of course. It made you the controller. All your inputs could be detected by the camera and the games would be gesture controlled. It all sounds fantastic, if not just a beefed up version of Sony's iToy. The technology behind it was solid, but sadly the developers who didn't work closely with Microsoft struggled to get anything good out of it. Didn't stop them putting out games though, did it? Instead of using the Iceberg format for this, I'm just going to highlight some of the games for the peripheral, but I will still aim to make them more obscure or pricey as the video goes on. My original idea for this was to talk about every game released, but there were just so many rehashes of the same game over and over, it doesn't seem useful. 2 words, Just Dance. You would imagine I would start this video with the most obvious of all titles released for the system, Kinect Adventures, but you'd be wrong. Even though this is the most common game you will run into, it was also the pack-in game for the system, so if you've ever used one of these things, you will know what it was. Unfortunately, this may be in abundance at every charity shop and car boot you've ever attended, but it's actually one of the better games on the system. Right, I said I wasn't going to talk about this one, so I'm going to shut up. I don't really want to talk about these, but I cannot start this off without a quick mention to by far the most common style of game this peripheral was used for, dancing games. I touched on these in the Iceberg video, and I'm not going to go into too much depth on them here. They're games where you just copy actions on screen to follow along with a dancing routine. You then scored at the end. Actually, I really like rhythm games. I can't judge on these. There are so many for the Kinect, it's actually laughable. Here's a complete list of these released in the English-speaking territories. This is being done so I can justify why I didn't want to talk about every game ever released. So here goes. Country Dance All-Stars, Dance Central 1, 2 and 3, Dance Paradise, Dance Evolution, which is also known as Dance Masters in the US for some reason, Grease Dance, oh god here it comes, the Just Dance titles, Just Dance 3, 4, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, it still continues, Greatest Hits, Just Dance Kids 1, Just Dance Kids 2, Just Dance Kids 2014. Disney even got in the action with Just Dance Disney Party 1 and 2 as well. Then we've got Let's Dance, which also had a spin-off called Let's Cheer. I think it's by the same people anyway. It's close enough to dance and I think it can go into this category, can't it? Michael Jackson The Experience, Nickelodeon Dance 1 and 2, The Black Eyed Peas Experience, The Hip Hop Dance Experience, and to end it, Victorious Time to Shine. The last one is based on some kids show and involves a little bit more than just dancing, but it's the same kind of gameplay throughout. Worryingly, that's roughly 25% of the library for the platform. These things must have been printing money at the time to justify the saturation, or it was simply the developers having a hard time to think of other ways to use the camera. Well, I can tell you the other idea that you all came up with. The other most common games on the Kinect are the fitness and health games. This can be seen in everything from the Your Shape games all the way up to the culmination of both fitness and dance with the Zumba games. There are a few odd fitness games to throw into the mix, such as UFC Personal Trainer, a game based on The Biggest Loser, and Jillian Michaels Fitness Adventure. That's a name I feel like I should recognise, but even playing the game I still don't know who she is. Then again, have you seen me? I'm not exactly a bastion for health. Most of this was likely written with a beer in hand. There's even a self-defense coach game, which basically teaches you to do nothing but kick people in the nuts. I've seen this one memed quite a bit on YouTube. As much as I don't really find these games all that interesting, at least they mostly work. Using repetitive motions in a pattern the camera can easily pick up was a winner for these studios. It was the developers that went a bit outside of the box that fell flat on their faces. So let's talk about some of those more adventurous titles. Yeah, that was a very short section, but I imagine you're glad about that. With a new peripheral or technology comes cash grabs from established franchises, and as you can guess, nobody gets there quicker than George Lucas himself. I will stress I don't know if he had anything to do with Star Wars at this point actually, but like sports, Star Wars isn't my biggest area of expertise. Honestly, I don't understand how I can be so much of a nerd, not really give a toss about Star Wars, or Star Trek come to think about it. The game itself, titled Star Wars Kinect, yeah I bet it took a team of a minimum 100 people to come up with that name, has a variety of game modes, from bad lightsaber battles, uncontrollable racing sections, and of all things, a Just Dance style Han Solo dance-off. Other than the racing and the dancing, it does try to emulate a real game, but it's so broken it's not worth your time. I've seen people try to defend this one in the past, but like everything the Kinect is good at, it only works well for the dance section. Well, I guess the lightsaber bits are passable at least. Now we've mentioned Star Wars, the next biggest cash cow needs to step into the ring. This time with Harry Potter for Kinect. Again, another well thought out title. This naming structure is starting to give me N64 vibes. This one starts with using the camera to create a digital version of yourself. Although I haven't tried it myself, the results I've seen online are terrifying. Other than creating a gross homunculus of yourself, the rest of the game centres around potion classes, which work well in the form of QuickTime events, as they're just activated by flailing your arms around. There are also Quidditch events, which play more like an on-rails road rash. I can actually see this one being fun for the kids, but for anyone wanting, a game, I'd skip this one and move on to Hogwarts Legacy on newer systems. Another popular franchise to get released was one I spoke about in my Xbox 360 Collecting Iceberg, so I won't touch on it too much here, but it's Fable the Journey, an on-rails Fable game. Not really the way people wanted the Fable series to go out on the 360, but it's what we got. Let's hope the new one coming out lives up to the hype, as I miss the series. Even anime franchises such as Dragon Ball Z were trying to get in on the action. There was a Dragon Ball Z game on the Kinect, cleverly named Dragon Ball Z for Kinect. To be honest, I ran out of ways to take the piss out of the way that they've been naming these games. If you're wondering how a game of this nature will work, well, it's a first-person fighting game, so pretty much Wii boxing, but you can sometimes fire projectiles. It does look pretty in parts, but again, it's still mediocre. Sadly, mediocre is as good as the Kinect library gets, really. One day I need to devoid a room in my house of all furniture, just so I can make enough space so I can do a proper video showing off the full potential of this mind-bending peripheral. I know this all sounds negative, but you can still have some fun with the camera, but it's not going to be something you're going to be pulling out regularly. Where else could they have gone with this thing though? They must have been running out of ideas by now, but nope. Games for a younger audience were also represented here. These were in the form of things like Sesame Street games, strangely one which was made by Double Fine of all people, called Once Upon a Monster, and the other was like an interactive TV episode. I honestly believe this is a great use of the technology, as younger kids might not understand how to use a controller, but they can easily have fun jumping around and yelling at the TV to their favourite Sesame Street characters. I don't know if these sold well or not, but I doubt anyone was dropping the money required to entertain their offspring this way if they didn't already have the technology in place. I imagine more achievement hunters have played these games instead of the intended audience. For the slightly older kids, developers did try to tap into that Nintendogs crowd, with games such as Collectibles and Fantastic Pets. Collectibles must have done well, as it did get a re-release in the form of Collectibles, now with bears. This is a sort of Ultimate Edition, which includes the Bear Island DLC on the disc. Which, to be honest, this one doesn't show up all that often in the wild, so if you see it, I'd grab it. These aren't overly engaging titles, but I imagine kids will have fun looking after a virtual pet. Well, I remember people enjoying Tamagotchis, and they were just a few pixels. This would have blown our tiny little child minds back in the day. The Kinect was Microsoft's answer to the Wii. You see, every console needed something motion related at the time, as the Wii was just out there printing money for Nintendo. This meant there were a few of what I would like to call Wii Sports clones. These are the games that are just set out with a shovelware style handful of simple events to choose from and play. The aforementioned Kinect Adventures is like this, with only a handful of events on offer, which get old rather quick, but at least they work pretty well. The most direct comparison will have to be the Kinect Sports games, these being Season 1 and Season 2. They contain the usual staples such as bowling, boxing and tennis. Well, it's table tennis this time if I remember rightly. They do try to mix it up with some football, volleyball and track and field events too, but they all play the same: jog on the spot or slap things with your hands and feet. They can be fun, but since the Kinect gives no feedback to movement, it just feels like you're stood there fighting off an attack from invisible wasps. These are pretty competent games though, but there is a plethora of other games in this format, and none of them do what they set out to very well. These include the likes of Big League Sports, Deca Sports Island Freedom, Game Party in Motion, and Motion Sports Explosion. That's right, most of these use the word sports or motion in the title. They do stray into other sports or activities such as darts, cornhole, pool or extreme sports such as snowboarding or skiing, but they all just use the same inputs with a new skin over the gameplay. Don't worry though, I haven't forgot about Cabela's Adventure Camp. This isn't like any of the other Cabela's hunting games available. I bet you didn't see this coming, but yeah, it's another minigame collection. You do take part in things like archery and clay pigeon, or skeet shooting as it would be called, but that's about as close as it gets to the mainline titles. But at least it mixes it up a little bit with some mountain biking and jet ski events. This isn't a pricey one, but it is one that doesn't seem to show up very often, so I'd grab it if you see it. There are even Wii crossover games, one of these being Sports Island Freedom that we just mentioned, and others such as Carnival Games, or Carnival Games Monkey See, Monkey Do as it is known in the States. I've never really understood why it has that subtitle though. Even bowling games such as Brunswick Pro Bowling got a Kinect version. These games may look the best here, but they don't play it. At least with the Wii it gives you some kind of tangible feedback in the form of a controller vibration. By now you must be thinking that every game is the same, but presented in another package, and you'll mostly be right. This is sadly due to the fact there aren't many inputs you can give the game safely without an actual interaction with anything, but that doesn't mean there weren't games that tried to give you a more in-depth experience. Let's take a look at a few. The bravest of contenders which tried to do something different award has to go to Steel Battalion Heavy Armor. If you're unaware, this is the sequel to the first game that released all the way back on the original Xbox, and it too is a very niche release. It's a game in which you pilot a giant mech in a war zone. What makes this different though is it required an absolutely massive controller to play it, which simulates the cockpit and foot pedals of the mech itself. Let's be honest, the game was fantastic. It has a very high learning curve, but it's still fantastic. But with such a massive add-on controller required to play it, it meant the game was also very expensive, and it still is to this day. This is where the Kinect steps in. This version gives you a virtual cockpit with all the bells and whistles you need to play being controlled with different gestures. This sounds like a great idea to start with, until you realise the camera wasn't accurate enough to track all the small motions required to be able to actually control the thing. You will find that anything you try to do either will not work or will just perform another random action. Sadly, due to this, it's one of the worst rated games for the Kinect. But at least some of the studios were out there trying something different with this thing. This may have actually worked better if it was released for the Xbox One Kinect, but that thing died an incredibly fast death, and has a very small library of games available for it. Not as intense as Steel Battalion, but they also tried to create full-on fighting games for the thing, most notably Fighters Uncaged. How did they intend to do this? Well, they moved the camera out of first person and had both fighters on screen at once. The camera is still behind the player though, and off to a weird angle. So yeah, it's just the same as anything in first person, just zoom back a bit. It's still going to play exactly the same though, as you don't have the full range of control of a character that you would with a controller. Think about it. In Fighters, you want to pull off insane over-the-top moves, and you're not going to be performing these as an input in the comfort of your own home. Not without some kind of stunt-level rope rig set up. So no matter how much they marketed a game like this, it was just again going to be flapping your arms around, with the computer decimating you, as your inputs don't get read by the camera. Did the companies learn from this? Well, no. One of the first games released for the Xbox One Kinect was a fighter called Fighter Within, which if you can believe it is actually a sequel to this pile of crap. The best of these attempted more in-depth games was probably Rise of Nightmares, a horror game from Sega. The game features a group of survivors trying to escape a dungeon they've just been imprisoned in. Again, it's a first-person game with melee combat, but it feels to have more of a VR game feel to it. This actually allows more control over the character, being able to freely walk about using body gestures, such as tilting your shoulders to turn and putting a leg out to walk forwards. It does have some level of lock-on to the enemies to make it easier to play, but this can be hit or miss. Would you like to play every game like this? No. But it was an interesting experiment, and if you like campy House of the Dead levels of horror, this one actually might be worth a play. It will still be a workout and frustrating as hell to control, but at least it's not another minigame collection. Some franchises even got Kinect-only sequels. Do you remember the Sonic Riders series from back in the PS2 era? If you have fond memories of playing these, even though back then they were still underwhelming titles, but don't worry, this will make them feel like top-tier experiences. Here on the Kinect, you need to be prepared for one of the worst games you could play, Sonic Free Riders. This is a hoverboard racing / trick game, which of course you control by leaning your body in all different directions and jumping about on the spot. I have tried to play this one a couple of times, and I've never got it to register any inputs. I spent most of my time just bumping into walls or turning for no reason. This is absolutely dreadful, and the Sonic fan community knows it. So you know what they've done? They've done what they always do. They've set out to improve it. There is actually a no Kinect patch that you can use to play the game with, which allows full controller support if you're willing to play this on the Xenia emulator on the PC. When the sales for this were tanking, Sega should have just done this themselves and saved the game. But nope, it was just left out there, hopefully to get some poor kid to pick it up, unaware of the dumpster fire they were getting themselves into. I've actually heard it's pretty good now, to be honest with the controller. It might be time to sail them high seas. This video is never going to be as long or as in depth as the last 360 Iceberg, but this is due to there being just a smaller pool of games to talk about, and the majority of them, as I said, all being the same. But that doesn't mean that some of them aren't harder to come by, or have at least a little bit of collectability to them. I think it's time to talk about them. We've already talked about the Dragon Ball game on Kinect, but if you see this one out and about for a good price, you should probably jump on it. CEX have it listed at just £32, but it's another one that doesn't show up in their stores very often. Going to eBay, you'll see a significant jump in price, with the cheaper listed copies being between £50 and £70. This is of course if you want the English language copies. Some of the ones from mainland Europe will drop it down to about the £35 to £40 range. Strangely, one of the minigame compilations is a bit pricey here in the UK too. That being Motion Explosion. I'm not sure if it got a full UK release, as it's way more plentiful in overseas EU countries, but I have seen it pop up in the shops here from time to time. This one will usually run you around the £40 mark, but it's quite often listed for more, but going for the last few sold, you might as well hold out rather than dive into the higher priced copies. This one though is also easier to find in the US. The one that gave me the most trouble to track down an English language copy of was Kung Fu High Impact. This one could be found for around £20 if you're happy with an Italian copy. The English language one again is usually sitting around the £70 to £80 mark. I got mine cheap because somebody had penned a love note to someone called Tom on the manual. Well, that's what I think it says. I imagine their relationship didn't last very long if this was the gift that was given. I actually need to talk about this one though. It's a very strange game. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you just slide about punching and kicking things whilst looking directly at the screen. It's one that needs to be seen to be believed, to be honest with you. I also don't think many people are even aware of its existence. Weirdly, the last collectible one to look out for here in the UK would be something we've spoken about briefly before. It's the later release of the Just Dance games. For some reason, they were supported all the way up until 2019. This is the most valuable of the releases, but it will only set you back at £30 or £40. But that's still too much for a yearly dancing release. Zumba World Party used to also command a little bit of money, but luckily over the years it's fallen down to under £10. This is great news, as I think shovelware like this shouldn't hold any value in my eyes. Unlike the main library of the 360, there weren't that many region exclusives. Japan got the Love Toray games, which I haven't ever played, but I believe them to be dancing games with a bit of a moe spin. So yeah, it's just a tad creepy. Actually, looking up the listing online for this, the description on PlayAsia reads, "Meet the girls in your club. Get used to holding their hands and their waists, guiding them across the dance floor." It then goes on to say how you can dance with them in swimsuits. Strangely, I don't think this one was made for the prepubescent girls the other games of this style were. Even worse, I'm worried it might star them. Only in Japan, of course. Let's get away from the questionable Japanese games to something just as disturbing: country music. One of the games I rattled off earlier was Country Dance All-Stars. This was unsurprisingly an American exclusive. I guess simply because country music, to my knowledge, just isn't that popular when you get outside of the States. Actually, America had the most exclusives for the Kinect. We will start with another very American title, which goes hand in hand with Country Dance All-Stars. Top Hand Rodeo. That's right, there was a bull riding game for the Kinect. Don't worry, it does mix the game up a little bit with shooting galleries and lassoing bulls from horseback. I do believe this one might have actually sold outside the States if it was released though. Well, to people like me anyway, out of pure curiosity. There was a bull riding game released here on the Xbox One and PS4, and I own both copies. Sadly, I've actually completed one of them as well. I'm still missing this one for the collection, unfortunately. Mostly just because I don't want to pay the import on it. They also got a lot of game show related games, like Wipeout. Not to be confused with the good game, you know, the futuristic racer. I think there was a version of Hole in the Wall as well, where you've just got to match the holes in the wall to pass through it. But yeah, I haven't played any of these. I do have Wipeout, but I haven't given it a go yet. Strangely, the first Wipeout does play on a UK system. Not only did the US get an exclusive dancing game though, surprise surprise, they got an exclusive fitness game by the name of Harley Pasternak's Hollywood Workout. Yet again, like other named fitness games, I have no idea who Harley Pasternak is, but he must be a household name somewhere. Well, after a quick Google, looks like he's Canadian. It's all about learning new things on this channel. The Kinect wasn't just used for its own games though, it was also used to enhance other games. I just realised you can't actually see me doing the air quotes for the word enhanced, but let's talk about them. As Microsoft really wanted the Kinect to take off, not only was there Kinect-only games, but they shoehorned the functionality into as many games as possible. They really wanted to keep that camera running at all times. Someone out there must have really been enjoying peeping on people in their underpants playing Forza. Talking of Forza, why would you use the Kinect? Well, Horizon allows you to use voice commands to activate the in-game computer / sat-nav. From memory, you could also control the car with your hands as if you were steering in Forza 4. A bit like another game we haven't mentioned actually, Kinect Joyride. A racing game for the system, where you play as if you're using an invisible steering wheel. Sadly, people realise your inputs didn't really do a lot in this one, and the game kind of just races itself if you stop moving. Sorry, small tangent there, let's get back on topic. Some really random games use the Kinect, such as Dead Space 3, which would allow you to perform actions such as healing your teammates, or accessing the inventory with voice commands. Skyrim was another that allowed voice commands to pull off spells. Mostly anything that said better with Kinect on the box was just using the microphone capabilities. When it comes to Japanese releases, the only game I can think of which has the Better with Kinect logo on the front of the box is the visual novel Instant Brain. I do have the game, but I'm yet to play it, so I don't really know how Kinect is used, but I have a big feeling it's in the Nin2 Jump game, which is a bonus hidden within. It's like a single screen platformer, if I remember rightly. Well, that's the only place I can think of using the Kinect in a visual novel anyway. But why did I want to bring this up anyway? Simply because I don't know when else I'll get the chance. This game was created by Cave. You know, the shmup people. Well, they hit a couple of unlockable games, one being Nin2 Jump, which I've just spoke about, and the other being Dodonpachi. So yeah, if you're going for a full shmup set, you might want to pick this one up. And with that, that's all I really have to say about the Kinect. That's the majority of the library covered. What I will do is at the end of this, I will list all the Kinect games that I know of, just in case you want to delve deeper into this library. This is a much shorter video than the last look at the 360, but there just wasn't as much released for it, but it still deserves to be looked at. If you know of any games I've missed off at the list at the end, or know of any cool uses for the Kinect, please let me know in the comments below. I would like to add that the homebrew and modding community have been using the Kinect camera for some really cool things, such as scanning models for use in 3D programs, using it to turn anything into a touchscreen, and mainly just augmented reality in general. I would recommend looking into these, as it shows what this technology could have been used for, other than bloody Just Dance. Don't worry though, I am working on a video that's going to be about more of the obscure 360 games available, but I plan on making that much more in depth than this. And now, because I've done this, I can skim over all the Kinect stuff in that video. I feel bad skimming over it, and they do deserve to be covered, but they really aren't that interesting. If you like this video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, you know, all that kind of stuff. I always try to answer everyone who takes time to interact and talk to me in the comments. With that said, have fun people. I'm buggering off now.